Hi everybody, welcome to A Course in Miracles Applied. Today's topic is it's almost like a chant. You know, if you were ever at a political rally and you hear those chants in the background, this is what democracy is made for and stuff like that. There's this line that is the topic of this segment, and it's about minimizing fear. It's about the ego's strategy of minimizing our fear, and the tagline is minimizing fear. It's what keeps us here. Minimizing fear. It's what keeps us here. So if you find yourself in a place all by yourself and you want to remind yourself of the ego's goal, you can chant it. You know, you can do it in a grocery store if you want, or make a t-shirt, minimizing fear. It's what keeps us here. I just get a chuckle whenever I think about it. But anyway, I thought I'm gonna make a segment out of it. Usually in this box down here, we have the line, identification is salvation, from the text. And I wiped that out and put this one in, minimizing fear is what keeps us here. This is basically the ego's purpose for us in this world. And it is, I think, especially for us course students, because we came into this course for a certain reason, right? We wanted, for some of us, the pain was too big of not remembering this, right? There was this, for me, it was this dull pain in my 20s that wasn't, I couldn't identify it, but it was just constantly there, like a low toothache that is constantly in the background, right? And it's just tugging and nagging constantly. So some of us maybe have that as the motor, the engine for us to realize there must be another way, and then somehow we find the course and we do the course as diligently as we can. And the ego's goal, as we have said many times before, is for us not to reach this point up here where we can make a choice against it, right? It makes total sense to have this as a goal. And we talked about the astronaut on the alien planet who walks next to somebody that has an oxygen tank and the person doesn't have one. So the person's goal would be to stay close with any means necessary to the other person that has the oxygen tank. Otherwise, the person would die. And the ego's motives are the very same. Without us, without the Son of God giving power to the ego is nothing. The ego is literally an illusion. It does not exist in reality, but we believe it. We made it real. So Jesus leads us to look at the ego from all different aspects, understanding its motives, most of all. Understanding the motive and the purpose of the ego. Once we understand the ego's purpose, what the ego's motive is for us, we can generalize it to everything we see and encounter. But the one item, and I think that would be, I was thinking about what the purpose of this channel is, right? Because it's pretty specific, and there's a lot of material out there that doesn't go as detailed into the nitty-gritty of the ego, and that might be fine for other people. It's not for me. And if you're listening to it, especially if you're listening to it or watching it consistently, then I think that's not for you either. And I see myself as just this tiny little fragment of a much larger picture, dealing with one aspect, right? And that is really to explore and to lay bare the motive, the goal of the ego for us, so we really understand it, and then eventually can make a choice against it, however painful that process might be. So minimizing fear, because we have found the Course, right? And the ego can't really, I would say, prevent us from doing the Course, right? What it can do, though, is, and it always works from the foggy part, the veiled part, this kind of subconscious part of our mind that is not 100% aware of the ego's purpose. That's where it can actually influence us, right? Once it's out in the open, it's much harder, and once we learn about the ego, we can actually really make up our mind and choose for the Holy Spirit. So what it cannot do, it cannot push the wagon off the track, but it can jump onto the wagon with us, right? And it can study the Course with us. And if we're not aware of it, it'll just delay our homecoming. That's really all. It doesn't do anything other than in time it takes longer to get back home. So all the Course does is save us time, and all that our looking at the ego's motives does is save us time and suffering. That's all. That's really all it can do. So the ego's goal, and that is the one, when Jesus says, what is not love is murder, that's a pretty clear statement, and there's not much you can misinterpret about the sentence. We can glance over it and move on with our day and not further think about it. That would be one item, one way of the egos being on the bandwagon with us. It would just say, hey, I see a horse cart, I don't know why, in the Wild West, don't look at that, let's go, right? Let's continue on our journey, and don't look at that big obstacle over there that says, what is not love is murder, right? Let's just continue on with our day. And the reason is very clear. The ego's motives are for us never, and I mean never, ever, for us to reach that point, but to make us believe we will reach it one day. That is the ego's goal. It's like, yes, you're doing the Course, great. But if we understand the ego's motives, that says, I will never, if it were up to the ego, which in the end it is not, right? In the end it is up to us with Jesus to look at it and then decide otherwise. But if it were up to the ego would say, I will never let you get up there. You will think you're up there, and I will make you believe you're up there. I have big screens of nice sunsets, and I'm going to put this in front of the cart. And you think you're going towards it, like, oh, this is a beautiful sunset. I'm going into the sunset with Jesus, right? Riding into the sunset with Jesus, or the Holy Spirit. And behind it is the abyss, right? Obviously, there's a large foam mat at the bottom. We can't get hurt. Jesus is foam mat, right? Or mattress or whatever. But it's hard to climb back out. So those are just the pitfalls that I have in myself seen and become aware of over the last, whenever I started 30 years ago. And it just becomes clearer and clearer and clearer the more I work with this material, that what the ego's goal is, for us to never reach that part. And the other thing to consider is, if you've ever known an athlete or somebody who was 100% dedicated to their path, right? Whether it's to a student to become the best attorney in the city, or whatever it is, the amount of dedication is almost 100%, right? The dedication of a lioness protecting their young from any kind of predator is 100%, right? The ego's motivation for us never to reach that point is 100%. It doesn't sleep. It never says, oh yeah, you know what, I'm gonna let you do your thing for a couple of days, and I'll be over there in the hammock under the palm trees in the sun, right? The ego would never think that, because the ego's number one goal is for us to be down here in this world, in this body, and never even to approach this. And it gives us all kinds of ways in which we can get off our path, ever so slightly, right? Again, this is just a matter of time. We will, and the Course says that we will be home. We're home already. We're at home in God, dreaming of exile, right? It is just a matter of how long we want to stay in the illusion, right? That's really the question to ask ourselves. And as Jesus asks us that question, how long, O Holy Son of God, how long? That is our question to ourselves. How long do we want to stay in this pain, in this separated world, right? So, minimizing fear. I'm gonna get to the quote. The quote is from chapter 11, section 5, the dynamics of the ego, the dynamics in quotation marks. And it's in paragraph 9, and it says, minimizing fear, but not its undoing, is the ego's constant effort, and is indeed a skill at which it is very ingenious, right? The ego's skill at minimizing fear is very ingenious. And why this skill is so ingenious is because its survival depends on that skill. Just as the lioness's survival, the skills of being really fast and powerful and being able to overcome any predator comes from her own purpose of protecting her young and feeding herself so that she can survive. The ego's goal is, the ego's skill is always connected to its purpose, right? Why would we be in this state of mind if there wouldn't be a purpose behind it? Nothing just happens, right? Nothing in our mind just happens. There's always a purpose. Ken Wapnick always said, purpose is everything. And when he says purpose is everything, it's literally everything, right? Without purpose, nothing means anything. The purpose is what makes it into something that can either help us or delay our homecoming. So the purpose of the ego is minimizing fear. Now let's talk about, let's interject or substitute fear with some other terms. Because it's not just fear. In the end, it's all fear, because we only have two emotions, love and fear. So any of the ego's emotions boil down to fear, right? And minimizing that fear is the ego's, minimizing fear, but not its undoing, is the ego's constant effort. It is a constant effort, meaning 100% 24/7, right? It doesn't stop trying to minimize our fear, but not undoing it. We could say the same thing for guilt, right? Minimizing guilt, not undoing it, is the ego's constant effort. We could say minimizing pain, but not undoing the pain, is the ego's constant effort. So if we find ourselves in a painful relationship and we have the course and we somehow get out of it and we feel great and we think the course works and we're in this happy stage, that would be an example of minimizing fear or minimizing pain, but not undoing it. Because the undoing of the pain can only be once we have looked at this, the cause for the pain, which would be the sin and the guilt in our mind. Because pain is basically the absence of complete peace. That would be pain. And the Course says the threshold of pain is high, but it's not, I don't know what the word is. But at some point there's the recognition that there must be a better way. But we think we're not in pain if we're not in this huge amount of pain. But the further we go along with the Course, the lower this threshold becomes, right? Where we realize, if I'm not at complete peace and love doesn't extend to everyone, I am indeed in pain. And the ego would not let us go to that point, because the ego's doctrine is minimizing pain, but not its undoing. So in one sense, or in other words, the ego's goal for us is to make this dream a little nicer. And Ken Wapnick speaks about that a lot, right? He always talks about that we have a dream and the phone rings and we don't want to get up and answer the phone. We take the phone in our dream and we answer the phone in our dream. And the phone then becomes an item that keeps us in the dream, right? So the ego's goal for us is to have a relatively nice life with less pain than before the Course came, but not without it. Minimizing pain, but not its undoing. The ego does not want us to undo the pain. The ego's goal for us is to be in this world, to stay identified in this world, but a little nicer. Right? Just not as much pain as we were in before. Our surroundings are a little nicer. Maybe our relationships have improved. Maybe our health has improved, or money has improved, right? That is the ego's goal. Because if we would be in utter and in excruciating pain or fear, if we would be in abject terror every day, we would question the ego seriously. And we would say, Jesus, this, I cannot take it. I can't take this pain. can't find this I can't find this line. That if the pain gets too much, then we would start questioning the ego much sooner. And in one sense, really, and that's the hard truth of the Course, in one sense, the Course leads us straight to that, right? It leads us straight to that point where we realize, oh my God, this is much more pain than I thought. It's much more fear than I thought. This is much more ego than I thought. Please help me. Sorry. But first of all, we shy away from pain because it's painful, right? We shy away from fear because it's painful. We shy away from guilt because it's painful. So our natural tendency in general is to stay away from it. And when the ego gives us a way of staying away from it, then we take that, right? But what it really does, and really that's the only thing it does, but what it does is it prolongs the pain. So minimizing pain, minimizing fear, minimizing guilt, minimizing shame, minimizing conflict, right, in relationships, but not its undoing. Minimizing the ego's impact on our lives, but not the ego's undoing, is the ego's constant effort. That's how it jumps onto the bandwagon with us and is with us on our journey much, much more than Jesus is. Right? We have to realize that we are 99% of our journey we're with the ego, 1% of the journey we're with Jesus. And Jesus says, really, this is all I need. I need you to just tell me that you're in your ego as much as you can. That's how you start getting towards me, right? It doesn't expect us to leave the ego and go to him. He knows our fear is way too big to come to him. We are in abject terror. We are completely afraid of love. We said that in the last segment. And many times before, right? Our fear of love is excruciating, and we're downgrading it to something we can manage. And we now say, oh, we're afraid of spiders, right? So we're minimizing the fear, not undoing the fear. It is what keeps us here, right? Minimizing fear is what keeps us here. And that is the ego's end game. The ego's end goal would be for us to be down here as a little happy, quote unquote, happy course student. And we glance over what is not love is murder, because we can't process it. Right? We cannot process a line like what is not love is murder, because it brings us to this point right here. We would look at this guilt that is there from our seeming separation from God, that we believe in so strongly. We would come in contact with it, and that would be painful. And we don't want to go near it, because behind it, as we said in the last segment, behind it is the love of God, and that's what we're really afraid of. So we're happy in this happy little life that we have with the Course, right? We're better off than before. And as long as we realize, that's my personal opinion, as long as we realize that there's more, and we just can't do it right now because we're too afraid, I think that brings us back on the right track. right? As long as we think, oh, this is fine, this is it now, this is what the Course is for, to make me a better dream figure, I think we're steering away from the sunset. We're just following the ego's sunset, right? And it just goes into the desert. But as long as we realize, you know what, there is more. I think there's more fear that I'm not touching. There's more pain that I'm not touching on. There's more guilt that I'm not touching on, that I'm not seeing in others, that I'm kind of denying. Then that's all Jesus needs, right, to us to teach us, because he can't work with anything that we don't offer. And if we think we're a happy little dreamer that is fine, Jesus can't help us, right? Because we're not opening our mind to him and say, listen, this is what I believe. My true belief is I have this underlying fear that comes up once in a while, and it pops up. I have this underlying guilt that pops up, or this pain, and I don't know what it is, and I can't seem to get rid of it. Please help me with that. And with his help, then we go a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper, and see where it brings us, right? Through the fear to this belief in guilt that we have, and looking at that with Jesus by our side. So we talked about the ego's motive to minimize our fear. And there's a bunch of places in the Course that explains that. But for me, the best one is in the Gifts of God, actually. That the very end of the book, The Gifts of God, is the prose poem, The Gifts of God. And it is about maybe 20 pages, 18 pages. And one of these sections in there, this was basically dictated to Helen a bunch of years after the Course was finished. So this is in a completely separate book. It is in a book that also contains her poetry. But at the very end, there's a section called The Gifts of God. And it's basically a beautiful, magnificent, and very deep summary of the Course principles, and just talking about some of the principles in a slightly different light, shedding light on some things that Jesus hasn't spoken about in that capacity. Right? It's almost like, okay, you just go through the Course first, for a bunch of years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, and then we'll go a little deeper, and you can read this in a way. It's very beautifully written, but its message is very clear, and it fits really perfectly with what we were talking about, the minimizing fear. So in the book, it's on page 120, and it is in the second paragraph of the chapter called The Ending of the Dream. And this paragraph starts with, so fear was made. I'm just going to read from it. It says, so fear was made, and with it came the need for gifts to lend the substance to the dream in which there is no substance. Now the dream seems to have value. For its offerings appears hope and strength and even love, if only for an instant, right? That would be the minimizing of the fear. Perhaps we are able to buy a house on the beach, right? There's nothing in the Course that says don't have a house on the beach, right? It's a great spot to have a house on the beach. But what Jesus is talking about is minimizing this fear, making this world so livable for us that we forget this again, right? We take the substitute for this and make it into something that looks like, oh, this car comes from the Holy Spirit, right? Or whatever it is, the material or relationships or anything like that. And Jesus says, now the dream seems to have value, right? This dream where the fear, the pain, the guilt is minimized. has value, for its offerings appear as hope and strength and even love, if only for an instant. Right? For Jesus, that's just an instant, because all those gifts, right, that we get from the ego, when we minimize fear, we are moving away from eternity, from that love, that peace that awaits us, right? They content the frightened dreamer for a little while, and let him not remember the first dream, which gifts of fear but offer him again. So the first dream in this terminology of the two gifts, of the gifts of God, would be this dream. So basically the first dream is this dream of sin, guilt, the attack on God, and fear. And the second dream is the dream in this world, right? And this dream in this world hides this dream, and this dream hides our decision-making capability to remember God and be at peace. So they content those gifts, right, of strength and love, if only for an instant, and hope. They content the frightened dreamer for a little while, and let him not remember the first dream, which gifts of fear but offer him again, right? So minimizing fear means we take something in the world and we cover over this fear, and we're minimizing it, right? Whatever minimizes our fear, that's what Jesus talks about. The seeming solace of illusion's gifts are now his armor. The seeming solace of illusion's gifts are now his armor. And the sword he holds to save himself from waking. The seeming solace of salvation, of illusion's gifts could be, doesn't have to be necessarily, but could be our path with the Course to minimize fear. And I see that in myself a lot, that I say, you know what, not right now, I'm in a more of a terror phase right now, but in general, I can see myself with like, oh, this is kind of working, right? And whenever it seems to be working, I have learned that is a relatively short period of time that it's working. And Ken Wapnick speaks about that a lot, right? The special relationship, special love relationship with things or with people seems to be working for a while, right? The offerings appear as hope and strength and even love, if only for an instant. They content the frightened dreamer for a little while, and let him not remember the first dream, which gifts of fear but offer him again. Right? The seeming solace of illusion's gifts are now his armor. So when we're just specifically for the Course, if the Course seems to be working for us, that is, I think, what he means, the seeming solace of illusion's gifts. Right? We have not touched the first dream. We are managing this fear. We're minimizing the fear. And Jesus wants to very gently and kindly and softly wants to bring us from here to realizing that minimizing fear does not give us the peace of God. He says, you're asking for a crumb. You're under the banquet table asking for a crumb when you could be sitting with all your brothers and sisters at the top of the table in the presence of God and have the peace of God, like it says in the little garden, right? The feast that love prepared for us. But when we minimize fear and try to manage living in this world just a little better, we are under the table and picking up crumbs that other people drop. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, we're not made for it, right? The Son of God is not made to sit under the table, under the banquet table, hiding from the other guests. It is his table. It is our table. We're hiding under the table, grasping for tiny little crumbs that we believe are the gifts of God. Right? Minimizing fear, but not its undoing, is the ego's constant effort. From when we wake up in the morning to when we go to sleep. And the seeming solace of illusion's gifts are now his armor and the sword he holds to save himself from waking. So minimizing fear is the shield, right? Minimizing guilt and pain is the sword that we are holding against Jesus and say, you come this far, but no, not further. Come no further. You shall not pass, right? And absolutely nothing in the Course says don't do it, because we have to do it. We're still too afraid to go through this, to hear. All Jesus asks us is to begin very small, in small steps, to realize what we're doing, right? Realize that we accept crumbs when we could have the whole banquet. For before he could awaken, he would first be forced to call to mind the first dream once again. Right? We're afraid to go through this sin, through this guilt, because it's not a pleasant thing to go to this point, not because this is so bad. It is painful, but we're more afraid of what's behind it, which is the love. The memory of God. That's what we're afraid of. And that's what we bring to Jesus, right? I am afraid of you, we can tell him. That's what the only reason for our relationship with Jesus is, that, or with the Holy Spirit. Is I want this car, or this house, or this I want this conflict to be gone, ultimately because I'm afraid of your love. I'm afraid of the song. That's why I want the tiny little notes. I can't handle more than the notes, Jesus. Please help me with that. That's all of us. We can't handle the song. That's why we're minimizing the song and take a couple of single notes and think that is the song. And then he continues. I mean, this is not getting any better. He says, it is not God who asks a price of him, but having drawn a veil across the truth, he now must let the veil be drawn away so that its lack of substance can be seen. So eventually we will talk to Jesus, and that depends on how much we start to trust him. And eventually we'll say, you know what? I know how this works down here. And I cannot be content with it anymore. I cannot be content with crumbs. I want to sit on the banquet. I want to sit next to everybody in this magnificent, beautiful love fest. That is the peace of God, right? I don't want to go for crumbs under the table anymore. And then Jesus says, okay, that's great. Now let's explore why you believe you belong down there, right? Why you believe you belong in the gutter, asking for crumbs, where you are in truth the Son of God, a prince among princes, right? You're the Holy Son of God, and you're sitting under the table asking for crumbs, and I can't just lift you up because you're too scared of what's up there. What I can tell you is look at those crumbs, let's explore them, and lead those crumbs, each one, back to their origin, which is the guilt that you believe you have committed, the sin of killing God. And step by step, we'll look at each of those crumbs, blue cheese, whole wheat, whatever is down there on the table, grapes. We'll explore each one of them. And we'll explore each one of them, trace them back to the reason why you believe you need to sit under the table in the first place. And you can't be in this magnificent congregation of the sonship. Why do you believe you're under the table asking for crumbs, right? So we have to draw the veil away and look at why you think you should be down there. Why do you think you should minimize fear and not undo it? Jesus says, I want to help you undo it. I want to help you undo the guilt. I want to help you undo your belief in sin and you believe that you attack God. I want to undo it. I want it gone. I don't want to minimize it. But for that, we have to look at it. Right? Look at each time we think hope and strength and even love is possible here. Special love that we think we love one person is a crumb. And Jesus says, we'll look at it together. And in time, when you're ready, we'll open the veil, we'll look at it together. You're going to close it again. And we'll wait. I'll wait for you. Right? You can wait for yourself until you're ready. We'll look a little closer. We can look a little longer. And eventually we'll realize there's nothing there. This is nothing. Nothing, 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 nothing. And from nothing can come nothing. If there's no fear because we didn't attack God, because there's no guilt, there's no sin, we don't have to minimize fear because it's not, the cause of fear is not existent. But we don't know that when we sit under the table, and that's why we need Jesus to look at the crumbs with us and realize each time we eat a little crumb, to realize why we do it. Right? Because we believe we're the home of evil, darkness, and sin. And then he gives us the reason why he wants to draw the veil away. He says, no one would hesitate to leave a dream of shock and terror, merciless decay, and sickening contortions, with despair always in sight and death not far behind, if he believed that it were but a dream. No one would hesitate to leave a dream of shock and terror, merciless decay, and sickening contortions. Merciless decay, that's our body, right? He talks about the body. Shock and terror. We're in shock and terror. We tried to leave this shock and terror. We're in this world. We want to minimize this terror. And we play with gifts, the seeming solace of illusions, gifts for a while, to make us not be so frightened, right? But Jesus says no one would stay in it if he would see that it is a dream. But in order for us to see that it is a dream, we have to draw the veil away, look at it with Jesus, and only then can we realize it is a dream. And for that, I think in practical terms, at some point, we make this commitment to Jesus or to the Holy Spirit to say, you know what, I don't want to minimize fear anymore, because it's not enough. I have tasted the stew at the top of the table. It's magnificent, and I can't deal with those crumbs anymore. Right? If we have, the more we really truly experience love, even if it's just once in our lifetime, this love, right? This magnificent revelation of God's love, the contrast will always be there. Once we sit at the table for 2 minutes, we will always have the contrast. Once you fly first class once, whenever you sit in economy, you will feel the difference all the time. And it's the same thing. So in order for us to realize it is a dream, we can't just say, looking out in the world and say, this is a dream. It makes no sense, right? It doesn't help. We have to get in touch with this guilt and our belief we attack God and this fear, and then together with Jesus, look at it. And eventually we will realize this is a dream. And then we can realize that the world is truly a dream. My body, everybody else's body. But if we start on the outside and just look outside and say, this is a dream, it sounds nice, but this is minimizing fear. That's what minimizing fear is. That we take the theory or the theory of the Course and say, oh, this is all an illusion. We're at home in God. It doesn't get us anywhere. This is what minimizing fear is, right? Because we can't look at the world and say it's not real if we still believe the one who is looking is real. As long as we look in the mirror in the morning, like Ken always said, and you see a face there and you think this is Stefan, you think you're not a dream. And if you don't think you're a dream, you can't think the world is not a dream, right? So taking the theory of the Course and making our lives easier and a little nicer, I think is fine for a while, until we come to a point where we realize, wait a minute, this is not, I'm still under the table. I'm getting some ribs, or if you're vegetarian, I'm getting some broccoli down here. But this isn't the feast. This is just a little dried up piece. And it contented the frightened dreamer for a while, but this isn't me. I'm still sitting under the table. I want to be in the banquet. I want to be in one of the chairs. And it says in chapter 9, section 8, paragraph 10, it says, you are altogether irreplaceable in the mind of God. No one else can fill your part in it. And while you leave your part of it empty, your eternal place merely waits for your return. So there's one chair at this banquet that is our chair. Right? That is your chair. No one else can fill that chair. And waking up literally means realizing that minimizing fear or living in this illusion a little bit better will not get me into that chair. It will get me into an illusion of slightly less pain, and my stomach is filled just a little bit when I smell that little spare rib, with rosemary and garlic. It's a tiny little piece, and the bone is it's almost empty. There's a tiny little bit left, and I smell it, and I'm like, oof, this is great. But it doesn't fill me, right? Because I'm not made to sit under the table. I'm irreplaceable in the mind of God. No one can fill that chair. But if I'm down there and believe I'm close to sitting in the chair, that is the illusion. And that is what Jesus talks about, right? The seeming solace of illusions gifts, the seeming solace of those little moments of, oh yeah, the Holy Spirit helped me with this job. That's fine, but it will not get you or get us into that chair at the banquet. And Jesus says, in order for me to get you into this chair, we need to explore the reason why you're sitting below this chair, below the table. And that reason is shame. We are ashamed to sit in this at the table because we believe we have done something horrific and we only deserve crumbs in our lives. Right? Jesus says you don't expect too much from life, but far too little. I don't know if this is the exact quote. Yeah, chapter 26, section 7. Here does the Son of God ask not too much, but far too little. He would sacrifice his own identity with everything to find a little treasure of his own, right? We sacrifice our identity. We think we are a thief and have to catch a couple of crumbs under the table. And we ask for far too little, even if we ask the Holy Spirit for a new car. Or even if we ask the Holy Spirit to have less conflict in a relationship. That's the start. The start is asking, I want less conflict in the relationship. And then Jesus says, okay, let's explore why you have conflict in your relationship is because you think you killed God. And that's what you project onto your partner. That's why you have conflicts in relationship, because you're reliving this one moment when the Course says, when terror took the place of love. That one single moment that we replay over and over and over again. Right? That's why we have conflicts in relationships. If we just ask the Holy Spirit to have less conflict in our relationship, that means we're trying to minimize the fear, which means we're staying under the table. It goes on. I'm going to just read a couple more. It says, and now he seeks within his dream to find what gifts it may contain. What gifts are under the table, right? We're scavenging the floor for stuff that dropped from the banquet. What can you get within its shadows? Who can save you now by giving you the love you threw away? What can you learn to do to make yourself a master over others? What is there that is your special gift within the dream? Find these and do not waken from the dream, for it can give you what you think you lack. So if I'm down there and I find another person down there and I say, hey, we're looking for the same things, right? And we think that's the love that we have thrown away. That's the special love relationship. Or we think we have a gift and we have this gift to share with the world. Let's say we think we're a good speaker and we have the Course in Miracles and we're now a teacher of the Course in Miracles. That's our gift. That's why I'm here on this planet, to save other Course students. Find these and do not waken from the dream. right? Finding a gift in this world, as lofty as it might think it is, if we might think it is. As long as we believe we're here, as long as we believe I am the one that has that gift, we're minimizing fear. We're minimizing pain. We're under the banquet table, not realizing that we're under the banquet table. We might have others down there and say, hey, I can teach you, right? I can teach you, look for better crumbs. It won't get us into the chair. The only thing that gets us into the chair, as I said before, is when Jesus can explain to us why we're down there. Why we're under the table. And for that to happen, we must realize we're under the table. Right? We must realize where we think we are. Our goal with the ego, and we're 99% connected to the ego, our goal with the ego is not to get returned to the table because we're too afraid. And that is the forgiveness, would be to bring this to Jesus and say, you know what? I'm not in peace. And there are many sections in the Course that describe that peace. And I have to tell you honestly, Jesus, I'm not in it. What you're describing, listen, perhaps you catch a hint of an ancient melody, not quite forgotten, and somehow familiar. I can just grasp it, but I can't get there. And Jesus says, you know what, this is great. Let's start the process, and I'm going to tell you why you can't get there. And why you can't get there is always because you believe you have destroyed the there. You have killed the there. You can't get there because we're so afraid of it. Right? And Jesus' whole task is to get us to a point where we realize, oh my God, I'm sitting under the table. I am searching for crumbs. I am satisfied with crumbs. Please help me to get up and somehow make my way back to this chair. Right? And it's a painful process to realize we're down there and we're asking for crumbs. It's painful because our whole lives are based on that. Minimizing fear is the purpose of our lives. Minimizing fear and not its undoing that's what we're doing. Right? Have a nice job, a nice house, family, be healthy, whatever it is. But we don't realize that we're sitting under the table. We're not at the banquet. The feeling at the banquet, and I'm under the table. I'm honest with you. I realize every day I'm under the table, but I have caught a couple of glimpses of what it is when you sit at the banquet, and it is a completely, utterly different experience. And the contrast to it is to the under the table is staggering. It is a staggering contrast. And in one sense, that's the driving force to get us to talk to Jesus and say, listen, I'm under the table, please help me. On the other hand, it is excruciating because the contrast is now it is so clear. It is so clear that anything we do here in this world, in this illusory world, is literally one drop of water compared to the ocean. It is a minuscule, tiny little fragment of a drop of water compared to the ocean. right, as a closing, I'm just going to read that beautiful, oh wait, the, there's a, I mean, the chapter, The Little Garden, really expresses a lot of that, what we spoke about, but it's a little long, so I'm just going to read from the Forgotten Song. And when Jesus says, if you think of the image of the banquet table versus sitting under it, it becomes so clear where we are, right? It says, listen, perhaps you catch a hint of an ancient state, not quite forgotten, dim perhaps, and yet not altogether unfamiliar, like a song whose name is long forgotten, and the circumstances in which you heard completely unremembered. Not the whole song has stayed with you, but just a little wisp of melody attached not to a person or a place or anything particular. But you remember from just this little part how lovely was the song, how wonderful the setting where you heard it, and how you loved those who were there and listened with you. The notes are nothing. Yet you have kept them with you, not for themselves, but as a soft reminder of what would make you weep if you remembered how dear it was to you. You could remember, yet you are afraid, believing you would lose the world you learned since then. And yet you know that nothing in this world, nothing in the world you learned is half so dear as this. Listen and see if you remember an ancient song you knew so long ago and held more dear than any melody you taught yourself to cherish since. Thanks for watching.